Dr. Bensong risked everything when he used the quantum leap accelerator to travel back in time. Now our team's working to find out why. As he leaps between bodies with no memory of who he is, he still has one hope. That his next leap...
Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corman Productions with my co-host Stacie, here to talk about the 7th episode of the Quantum Leap revival, O Ye of Little Faith. The episode was directed by Chris Grismer, who co-directed the previous episode, What a Disaster. The episode was written by Margarita Matthews, who also serves as story editor so far for every episode of the series. Before going any further, I will tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a spoiler-free podcast, so if you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you go and check it out, and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you are listening on one of the platforms that this podcast is now listenable, please subscribe. You can also head over to my YouTube channel, Corman Productions, where this podcast can be watched, as well as additional content can be discovered, both Quantum Leap related and otherwise. If you are already on my YouTube channel and like this podcast, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel. This week's shout out goes to Kelly M, who pointed out a mistake that I made last week. In the scene where Ben and his wife go back to the house to look for Jason, I said that the wife wasn't there, and this actually influenced the conversation for a few minutes. But as it turns out, she actually was in that scene for a very brief amount of time. So brief that my 41-year-old brain completely missed it. She basically comes in yelling, "Jason, Jason," twice, immediately gives up on Jason being there, tells Ben real quick that she's going to go look for Brandon to see if Jason is with Brandon. And yeah, that was it. I still, yes, I made a mistake, but at the same time, it doesn't change my opinion that those were some oddly constructed scenes. So kudos to Kelly M for catching my mistake. Stacie, your thoughts on this week's episode?
I enjoyed this episode. I think that I have a couple criticisms. One, I think it was really dark. Okay, so you have to watch this episode with the lights off, or you're not going to see all of the details in the sets and things, which are really beautiful. I think they did a great job with the setting. I said before, we talked about this last week, that this is the very first time that we've touched the 1930s. And I think they really did a really great job with it. It was beautiful. But if you're watching with the lights on, you might not see it all because there's not a lot of lighting in this whole episode. There's a lot of people in this episode, which got a little crazy at sometimes trying to take notes.
There were a few people that looked very similar to each other, like Lola and Magda. They looked really close.
Well, except one was wearing a maid's costume.
Well, yes.
But yeah, there was a lot going on. So it was a little busy as far as there was a lot of people. I feel like the story moved really, really quickly, which is something this series tends to do a lot. I'd like them to slow down just a little bit and let us absorb all of the things they're saying before constantly, plowing forward into the next scene. But other than those little criticisms, I really enjoyed the episode. I like how it all played out. It was in the veil of being a horror episode, something paranormal going on. Of course, it changes into something else, but I feel like it was really beautiful, for a Halloween episode. I feel like it was definitely the right time for them to play with all those mechanics.
Yes, I too thought this episode was pretty good. I do have some criticisms as well. There's definitely some holes here and there, but actually some of the holes are things that aren't really holes. But at the same time, it's not totally made clear, and some of it is kind of contrived. Mm-hmm. They then ended up Scooby-Dooing this episode. It ended up turning into a Scooby-Doo episode, kind of like I suggested to you. I don't think I did it in the podcast. I think it was in a conversation afterwards.
Yeah, that's one problem. We talk about the episode before we record, then we talk about it some more, and sometimes we forget what actually made it into the recording.
And there were less scenes at the project this time around, which I actually think was a strength of the episode.
Yeah, it didn't focus on that a lot. In fact, Addison and Ben had very little contact in this episode. And that is something that I suspected was going to happen. Because we're comparing this, right? This episode's constantly compared to Boogeyman.
Yes.
Which that's because that was the Halloween episode of the original series.
It wasn't the only one, but it was definitely the most famous and probably the best one.
If you say the Halloween episode, that's what people are talking about.
You think of the Boogeyman.
Yeah, I mean, it took place on Halloween. I think it aired right around Halloween, whereas some of the other kind of spookier episodes weren't necessarily official Halloween episodes. So we definitely have nods to that. I saw nods and Easter eggs to a bunch of different episodes mentioned throughout this episode. Like certain things people would say would make me think about this episode or that episode, as well as other media. Obviously, we're playing on The Exorcist here.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of things that kind of nodded to that movie, series, book. Even as far as, you know, people are talking about online the original real case that The Exorcist was based on. And really the only real connection I see is Maryland.
Right, you did mention that last week.
Yeah, that the original case took place in Maryland. Articles had attributed this episode, O Ye of Little Faith, is taking place 1934 Maryland. I don't think they really confirmed in the episode that we are in Maryland. Like, no one ever said, you are in this town, Maryland.
Except for the fact that the priest comes from Baltimore.
Right, Davenport came all the way from Baltimore. So we're mentioning Maryland, but does that mean we're actually in Maryland? We could be in a neighboring state if we traveled here.
That's true.
And that, again, is a big criticism I'm having with this series right now, is we're not getting that. Like, okay, so when Al would come in and talk to Sam, he says, your name is so-and-so, so-and-so. It is Friday, June 14th, 1963, and you're in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Like, we'd get that setting, like, spelled out for us. And that's not happening in the series. The first couple episodes, they did it. And then they dropped it completely. The only time they mentioned 1934 in this episode is when Addison was back at the project. She specifically calls out 1934. She never said to Ben, you're in 1934. You're in this town. That never happened. And I don't know if it's editing that they're taking that out because they don't feel it's necessary, or if they're not including that in the script at all, but I'm missing it.
Yeah. The time and the place was definitely a big part of the original series in setting up the scene and, you know, exactly when in history this is taking place. And that is definitely something that we are missing with this new series. This is, as we mentioned before, this is a supernatural themed episode. The original series, a lot of the times when it had supernatural episodes, liked to have its cake and eat it too. Going back to A Portrait for Troyan, which turned out to mostly be just some kind of wacky scheme of the brothers over Troyan. But then Miss Stultz turns out to be a ghost. In The Boogeyman, the devil was real, except for the fact that there's some speculation out there that it could have all been a dream.
Right, it all happened in Sam's head. Did it really happen or not? I mean, if it didn't really happen, how did he know all these characters' names and their situations, and how did he know exactly how Telly was about to die? It wasn't just a dream because he had some insights, right?
Right, it could have been a premonition of some kind, but still, it's all just a dream is not my preferred interpretation of that episode. And
it's funny, I'll mention just real quick while we're talking about Boogeyman. My husband and I did watch this episode. Last week I said it was our next one to watch. We watched it. He had an interesting take on this.
Well, let's hear this.
Yeah, I was curious, on how he was going to interpret it. Was it the devil? Was it a dream? Here's what he kept, when we debated this for quite a while. And he says to me, well, Sam leaped again at the end and went back to the beginning and started over. And I was like, well, no, he fell down the stairs and all this happened while, he hit his head and he's been out for a few minutes. And my husband was like, well, no, I really see it as, he got a chance to start over at the beginning and start again.
There is precedence for that in the original series. And I'm specifically talking about the first Evil Leaper episode, where he ends up back at the beginning of the episode at the end of that. So it's possible that he's correct there.
Yeah. He was like, well, that must be what happens when you fail. You just do the leap again. And I was like, that's an interesting way to look at this. I haven't seen anyone talk about the whole Boogeyman devil scenario as just starting over and getting a second chance at it. So I found that perspective interesting. I don't know if I necessarily agree with him in this case, but it's interesting that that's where, a first-time viewer's mind went.
Okay, that's interesting. The other example would be Ghost Ship, where it was basically a Bermuda Triangle themed episode. For the most part, everything was sort of given an explanation by Sam, except for there's this ship that Sam sees, and that basically the pilot in that episode describes having been on, which I think turns out to be the Queen Mary or something along those lines, a ship that like disappeared long before these episodes' events. So there is an insinuation of paranormal stuff going on there.
I don't think that was Queen Mary.
It wasn't Queen Mary? I don't remember exactly.
The Queen Mary was in Seabride.
That's right.
Yeah,
right.
that was Queen Mary they were on.
There was some other ship.
It was something to do with the war.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't remember the details. I haven't seen that episode in a long time.
Yeah, I haven't rewatched it.
But yeah, I know what you're talking about. There was definitely something that I was like, wait a minute, like that can't be.
And then in the Curse of Ptah Hutup, I can't pronounce that episode's name, I'm sorry.
The mummy episode.
Yes, basically mummies are real.
Mummies are real, right? We found at the end of that episode that the curse was real, the mummy came to life. And there was no logical, real-world explanation for that.
In that instance, they did not provide like any kind of rational explanation for that. There was Starlight, Starbright, in which case aliens were proven real.
Mm-hmm.
Blood Moon, which, okay, maybe these guys actually aren't vampires, except the insinuation at the end is maybe he really is. And then the final one was the Beast Within, where Bigfoot turned out to be real. So the original series had a bunch of supernatural or otherwise themed episodes, in which case they tried to play it both ways. And I was curious which direction this episode would go in.
Right. And I think the bottom line is, when you get to the end of this episode, they're pretty much trying to say there wasn't really anything paranormal going on here. They explained away most of it. They left maybe a couple things up to interpretation.
Some of them are not fully explained, and some of it's a little contrived, but we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah. So, we open with what we saw last week. Ben leaps in. He's a priest, Father Davenport from Baltimore. We get some odd angles. Nice job by Chris Grismer here. He had some nice directorial flourishes in this episode. He enters the house. The house number is 669. That turns into 666. We saw that last week. Yeah,
which is a direct callback to Boogeyman, where Mary's house number turned from 966 to 666.
We are introduced to Lola, Daisy's mother, Daisy being the girl that is supposedly possessed. We are also introduced to the maid, Magda. That was her name, right?
Magda, yep.
Okay. I'm glad I got that mostly right.
And Lola is the one played by Elise Levesque.
That's the one that appeared on Stargate.
Yeah, she was Chloe in Stargate Universe. And that's the one that when I first saw the trailer, she reminded me of
Olivia Wilde.
Olivia Wilde.
Last week.
Yeah. And I do see a resemblance when they have their hair up like that. Did you see it?
Not really, but no. I believe it. We get a jump scare courtesy of Addison, who appears barely in this episode. She's like in the before the credits, and then she's gone for the most of the rest of the week.
We see her in the project a little bit,
a few scenes, and then there's a hallucination.
There's like a dream sequence where she's not really there, but we get to see the actress.
And I haven't mentioned this yet, but Magic doesn't appear in this episode at all.
No, he was not to be seen. He must have taken a holiday.
Good for him. He needs to rest. Oh yeah, so initially Addison thinks that that Ben is wearing a costume, which I thought was weird because I figured she would know who Ben had.
Yeah, she hadn't looked at anything yet. But how do you not know where you're going if you found him?
Right.
But she saw that the date is Halloween. There's kids outside in costumes, so her initial thought was, "Hey, it's a costume party. Nice costume."
So he ends up following Lola, where we meet Charles, father of Daisy, and Percy, his brother. And then Contessa Gray, who's their Daisy's grandmother, soon joins the crowd.
She's actually her great aunt.
Great aunt? Wow,
yes.
I got that wrong.
Tessa is the aunt of Charles and Percy.
Okay. I thought she was their mother at first.
No, she was their aunt.
I misunderstood that.
Yeah, Aunt Tessa.
Okay. And they are all potential suspects in this episode's shenanigans.
And that's what I'm saying. There's just like a lot of people here.
Which is why I felt the need to bring all of them up.
And they throw them at you really fast.
Yeah, they're all very relevant to to this episode, so yeah, I don't usually go through all the characters like that, but I felt the need to do so, like here. Addison tells Ben that Ziggy says there's an 89% chance he's there to perform an exorcism.
Yeah.
That's a very high number for something that turns out to be completely and totally wrong.
Yes, absolutely. And we got the idea here that, they haven't really dug into the history yet. Addison doesn't know much. If anything, she doesn't even tell us the date again at this point.
Right.
And I don't know. It seems funny, yeah, that Ziggy has pulled up that number without giving us any facts about the situation.
Ben reacts to this news out loud, and it's the first time he speaks in this episode. He goes through a couple of minutes of this episode without saying a single word. He just kind of reacts and nods and doesn't even say anything to Addison, which is a good thing because there's a bunch of people around and, they don't need to think he's crazy like he does in a couple of scenes throughout the series so far.
Yeah, and he did, this was him responding to Addison in that moment, right? He
Right.
said, what? And
He covers himself
everybody's
pretty nicely.
like, huh? Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you saying what? And then, yeah, he covers it.
Yeah, he does it pretty good. He does a good job there. I should point out the fact that Ben doesn't drink in this scene. He's offered a drink, and he does not take it, which is relevant for the rest of the episode. Ben asks for the restroom, and Addison suggests asking for the water closet, which is the parlance in 1930s.
Mm-hmm. Still, they haven't actually told us the year 1934.
Right, but Addison seems to know that obscure fact off the top of her head.
I really feel like they filmed that here, setting the scene moment and cut it out.
Mm.
And if that's the case, editors, please, stop doing that.
Okay, so he's in the water closet where he's expressing his dismay that he's there to perform an exorcism because Ben is a scientist and he doesn't believe in such things. In the original history, he's told the priest failed and Daisy ended up dying 6 minutes after midnight, which is, kind of very oddly specific.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's fitting, but...
I mean, normally you would just say 12:06.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't say 6 minutes after midnight. And during that scene, most of my notes really is just writing out all these people's names and a bunch of quotes of things that they said. And this was the first quote I wrote down. I really liked it because he's like, I don't believe in possession. And Addison goes, you're literally possessing that guy's body right now.
Right.
And he goes, okay, fair point. So I like that. I thought that was cute. But yeah, how does Addison has pulled up the information that Daisy's going to die at 12:06 without them finding the fact that another person's going to die first?
Right.
Shouldn't they have known that right now?
Yeah, they completely missed that little detail, which is not a little detail at all.
Yeah, I mean, if two people are going to die tonight, shouldn't you be talking about the one that dies first?
Yeah, Ziggy is basically in this episode, helping Ben for about 5 minutes, and he's still really, really bad at his job.
Yeah.
Or her. I'm not sure which with the pronouns with Ziggy is at this point. In this original series, it was kind of portrayed as a woman, but
in the original series, Ziggy was a he.
Yeah.
Until later, when they gave
Ziggy
Deborah Pratt's voice, then Ziggy became she. And in this series, they haven't given Ziggy an identity. They have not personified Ziggy in the slightest, which I really hope they change that soon because I miss Ziggy.
Well, according to Deborah Pratt, we're going to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
We'll see if that ends up being true. Ben ends up saying that, spoiler alert, demons aren't real. Well, thanks, Ben, for ruining the episode for me.
And I did note that Addison was kind of like, well, I got the insinuation she might believe this is true.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, she wasn't there to see for herself how it plays out. She's not there for very long.
I actually think that's kind of to the episode's detriment that we didn't get the other side of Ben's scientific view, because we had the doctor with Ben, and they have both basically the same viewpoints.
Right.
So having a person like a main character, Addison, there to say, well, maybe this is true.
Yeah. Al's
play
part.
devil's advocate.
That was always what Al did. Al always believed in the crazy scenarios.
So I kind of think that Addison not being in there is actually kind of a weakness of the episode.
Yeah.
Because it didn't provide that perspective.
Right.
Lola says that the possession started 3 weeks ago. Her strength doubled unnaturally, and she started speaking in riddles, and can't remember things that she said or done. And wow, that sounds really bad, except for the fact that you can't trust anything that Lola says in this episode when all is said and done.
Right. But at this point,
we don't know that.
You can't trust anything anyone's saying,
Mhm.
right? Now, as the viewer, now Ben going in, he doesn't know what's going on. He's just kind of absorbing it all. As the viewer, we have a very biased viewpoint going into this episode, right?
Yeah.
Because we are instinctively, as an audience, comparing this to Boogeyman.
Right.
So at this point in time, I wrote down my questions right from the beginning. Okay, is Addison the devil? Like, I'm watching Addison. I'm dissecting every word she's saying. Is this really Addison?
And examining her behavior at the same time.
Absolutely. And then also, I'm looking at Magda. I wrote down, is the maid a ghost? Like, I'm expecting these callbacks, you know, and I'm looking for them. And I also, at the same point, I wrote, I'm waiting for a goat. I was expecting a goat to appear in this episode.
Yes, the murderous goat that was the main villain of Boogeyman, though not really.
The goat was a big character in that episode, and I was expecting a goat or a goat reference. We didn't get one, but I was waiting for it.
I made a ton of dumb goat jokes throughout the Boogeyman video that I did on that series, so I was hoping to do a reprise of that, but sadly, no.
Yeah, the only real reference I think I saw to Boogeyman specifically was the house number thing, and then we moved past that.
As they move closer to Daisy's room, Ben asks about the smell, and Lola says it's the smell of rotting flesh from the demon. They enter the room. Daisy is moaning, all demon-like. There's a sign on the bed that says, "Open mine eyes to see."
Yeah.
Written in blood,
I was really expecting that to, like, mean something.
Yes.
Like, I'm like, is there something written under her eyelids? Like, I was looking for some real literal thing having to do with eyeballs here.
I was going to do a Google search to see if that phrase meant anything or was connected to anything. I didn't end up doing it.
I didn't either, no. But yeah, I thought we were going to come back to that, and we really...
It's just a random thing written on someone's wall.
Come back to that phrase, yeah.
Daisy ends up seeing Ben, which is kind of revealed at the end of the episode, and says that he's an angel there to save her from the demon.
Yeah.
And Daisy herself really believes that she's being possessed by
she believes she's possessed. And that moment when she says there's an angel, that, I told you there's a lot of things that I felt like Easter eggy nods. That really brought me back to Teresa in Another Mother, who could see Sam and Al, and their explanation was that they were angels.
Oh, yeah.
And that came up a couple times throughout the original series, the idea that they're angels. So I felt like that was definitely a nod saying, oh, it's an angel here to help me.
There was actually a theory out there somewhere, I don't remember where it originated from, that leapers were basically dead and leaping around in time. What was the name of the woman from A Wonderful Leap?
Angela,
that's right. So yeah, there was some insinuations that leapers were actually people that had died.
As far as the other leapers besides Sam.
Not just Sam.
In Mirror Image, right, there were leapers. And yeah, I think that was definitely something that had been tossed around in discussions is, are these people kind of the personification of the angels, what we think of as angels? And yeah. So again, I saw that as a nice nod to Another Mother and a little girl, Teresa, who was played by Troian Bellisario. And we've talked about this. I don't know if I mentioned on the air. I really would love a Troian Bellisario cameo in this series.
I'm sure you've mentioned that at least once on air. So she's restrained. Daisy is restrained, not with rope, because Lola says that she chewed through it, which I'm pretty sure is not actually true. They probably just cut the rope and blamed it on Daisy.
Yeah, they probably, cut it very fine. Maybe she chewed through the last couple strings or something.
I'm thinking they should have probably not killed her, but kept her alive so that they could use her as an excuse for just about any crime that they wanted to commit.
But that wouldn't have gotten them to their motive.
Yes, the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Okay, so Addison says that there are 3 steps to an exorcism. I'm not sure how true this is. This is another thing I didn't look up. The one is to command the demon to reveal itself. And to do that, you have to speak in Latin. Was that the Bible that he was reading from?
I think I saw the book in one of the press photos, and I feel like it said something on it, something specific, and then I never went back and looked at that again. But I feel like more so than just a Bible, as it was more maybe something more specific to exorcisms.
That priests have handy to perform them.
Right. I mean, I feel like this is a sanctioned exorcism, right? He's like a legit priest that was sent here to do this.
Yes, they did speak at the beginning about his reputation.
Yeah.
The second one is the exorcist and the demon fight for the soul of the possessed. And 3, the demon either leaves or the priest bails.
Mm-hmm.
Ben reads from the book. He starts to try to perform to command the demon to reveal itself. The lights flicker. Addison flickers. She struggles to be heard, and eventually she disappears. Yeah. Ben sees a vision of some demonic-looking thing
that seemed to rise from Daisy's bed.
Yes. And then we have credits. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead here and spoil things a little bit. I mean, you've probably already seen the episode. If you haven't, I'm not sure why you're listening to me now. But yes, so Ben, when all is said and done, is being dosed with Jimson weed to make him hallucinate. Ben has not yet been dosed yet.
That hasn't happened yet, no.
So initially I'm like, okay, but so this is a giant hole. But then it kind of occurred to me, as you mentioned when we were talking, that this was actually Janice appearing to him. But it's the timing is really contrived.
Yeah, it's very convenient,
yes,
right?
Yes.
For the setting of this being our Halloween episode, that the way that Janice is coming through is looking so super duper creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And that she came right at that moment. So first watch through, right? Watching this scene, it seems like Ben's reading the Latin. Oh, and let's mention before we move too further from that little thing that Addison said. She made that comment.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She goes, "Oh, at least you can use your high school Latin."
Mm-hmm.
When they first said it was going to be in Latin, and it's like, Addison, you know that Ben speaks Latin. Ben's fluent in Latin. We've learned that.
Right.
And you're the one who first told him way back in the pilot that he speaks 6 or 8 languages or whatever it is. How do you not know that your fiance is fluent in Latin? Why would you bring up high school Latin?
That's one of the reasons why you still thought that.
Yeah, because at this point, right, I'm looking at Addison. I'm like, Addison wouldn't say that. And I mean, she did. That's the bottom line, is Addison did say that, and it was a stupid thing for her to say because, hello, your fiance is not recalling high school Latin. He speaks Latin fluently.
The other weird thing that she said in that scene that we didn't mention was her saying that the machine left you here.
Yeah, this is. I think this is actually back when they were still in the bathroom.
Oh, really? I thought that was in that scene, but I could be.
Either way, it was during this. This is really our only scene between Ben and actual Addison throughout the whole episode, and yeah, she said the machine sent you here for a reason, which it felt like a very weird way to say that. Mm-hmm. And we were both questioning that, right? Like, why is she saying the machine sent you here? Right. Is she talking about Ziggy?
Right. Who exactly is
the machine? Because we've learned that these destinations of these leaps were all predetermined and programmed into that new program that Janice and Ben put into Ziggy. So if you're going to say somebody sent you here, you should be talking about Janice.
Right.
Or the program. Mm-hmm. But to say the machine sent you here felt like a weird reference.
A weird phrasing for sure.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why we sort of were suspicious of Addison. Yeah. Other than the fact that we were pretty much...
We went into it...
Prejudiced, basically.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder if they wrote these kind of awkward lines for her to enforce that thought for a little while.
I'm sure they were aware of that.
Even so far as when he starts reading the Latin... Okay, this is where I was going to say originally. It almost feels like he's exorcising Addison from the room, right? He starts speaking, and that's when she starts glitching out. She loses audio, and then she gets gone for good. It almost felt like my initial thought was, is he exorcising her? Like, is that the demon in the form of Addison, and he's kind of sending her away right now? So, yeah, I thought that's what was going on at first. As, the first watch through is, it's not Addison, and he's casting her out in this moment.
Well, that notion is quickly dispelled because after the credits, we see Addison returning to the project, trying to figure out what's going on.
Right.
Apparently, Ian is already trying to figure it out, wearing mouse ears because it's Halloween.
Cat ears.
Cat ears, my bad.
She said, they said something about, I keep them in my desk in case of an emergency.
Yes, that was a cute pun.
Really, And I still don't know, was it Halloween in the present day?
There's no way to really know.
Yeah.
They don't really indicate it otherwise.
We talked about that last week, right? Like, we did. I don't think we talked about it in the podcast, but what is Halloween in the episode? Is it Halloween at the project too? Like, Ian's wearing these cat ears for no reason other than the fact that they're having an emergency. I didn't get it.
Ian ends up suggesting that maybe the demon is responsible for the imaging chamber going down. And it doesn't think it's that far-fetched because Sam Beckett believed that God was responsible for his leaves, which is interesting. How the heck would Ian even know that?
Well, it must have been in the records.
Oh, okay.
And maybe like Al's journals of the cases.
Mm-hmm.
But, I did note that. Like, Ian was like, well, Sam Beckett believed, which means clearly no one in this team believes that's what sent Sam on his way.
Right.
They are fully grounded in they're fully grounded in science, which, I mean, Sam was too. Sam was a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like his faith grew a lot as the series progressed. And more he took on the thought that, there is divine intervention in what's happening to him. I feel like he didn't think that right off the bat,
Probably not.
But Ian definitely gives us the insinuation here that this project in 2022 doesn't believe there's any intervention other than that of people, right? That we made this technology, we control this technology. Now, Ben left because of something Janice did, and they don't see this as anything other than scientific discovery.
Now, I'm wondering if they're going to go the original series route and have this be kind of a journey for Ben as well, towards believing more in divine intervention, if that's the route that they're ultimately going to end up taking.
I mean, in this episode, we did see Ben kind of let go a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you'll get to that
a
little bit later, but definitely we see that emerging,
mm-hmm.
right? Where he's like, I need to have an open mind about the world around me. As Addison already pointed out, you don't believe in possession. You're literally possessing somebody.
Right.
Now, you may not be doing it through like the means that people see, but you are possessing somebody's body. You do it every time you leave.
Right. Okay, so in the past, Ben wants Addison to reappear, but that's not going to happen for the rest of the episode. He is not going to see Addison outside of a hallucination for the rest of the episode. A doctor comes into the scene, and initially, Ben ends up thinking of this person as a kindred spirit. Two scientific minds. Mm-hmm. Until he starts proposing a lobotomy and electric shots.
Which I wrote on my Easter egg list. That's definitely pulled me right into shock theater.
Right.
Which was another important episode in the original series finale, where Sam undergoes shock therapy. Of course, we know where that went. But to have that mentioned here as being like this brand new advancement in medicine in the 30s, I liked them pulling that in. Like, it really helps remember, like, we're in the 1930s. We're very, very far from any medicine that Ben knows.
Right. So they're not quite kindred spirits.
No.
They're scientific minds, but they're from very different eras.
And also to point out that this doctor does not see Ben as a scientist, right? He's looking at a priest. He's looking at a priest. And he sees him very much as part of the problem.
The doctor ends up removing the restraints, saying she's a girl of 18, and I found that phrasing pretty interesting, and that she couldn't possibly hurt anybody. Well, that's kind of sexist. You don't think 18-year-old girls can hurt people? I don't know. Ben and the girl bond. I think the doctor left the scene at this point, and reveals that she started to see terrible things about 3 weeks ago, or actually it's been about 3 weeks since her 18th birthday that she started seeing things. Daisy believes in the demon and is very religious, and she says she's intending to be faithful even into death. Ben exits her room and runs into Contessa, who thanks him for being there, and says that he is the answer to their prayers, though I doubt Ben feels that way. Now, this is actually where we have another little moment where we see like a spectral figure in the background, which is before Ben was hallucinating.
Yeah.
And I suppose we are left to presume when the episode is over that was Janice trying to get contact.
That's Janice still trying to make contact with Ben and failing. And, you know, if you look at it, it makes sense that she'd have a hard time connecting him, right? It'd be a little too easy if she was just like, hey, Ben, I'm here.
Right.
Because she is using 30-year-old technology. She has Al's original hand link. While it's still Ziggy, you know, Ziggy, I'm sure, has some advancements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you take something from today, a computer from today, and you stick in a 30-year-old game into a computer today, it doesn't work. You have to you got to play with it. You got to change a bunch of settings. You got to do all this stuff to try and make it compatible. And so it's like that, right? She's coming through a little glitchy. It's not quite working.
See, this I didn't have as much of a problem with as the first time that they tried this, because in that scene, the original scene, it was just too contrived, too coincidental that all this stuff was happening right now.
Yeah.
At the perfect moment.
And, I mean, it worked. For me, at least, I didn't have any suspicion that Janice was involved in this moment until we actually got to the end of the episode.
Right.
Did you have any?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I'm looking
I didn't think that was going to come into the plot for this week's episode.
No, I'm looking for, you know, the devil and the ghosts and the demons and all of these Halloween things to come into play.
Downstairs, Daisy's Uncle Percy offers Ben a drink. He doesn't take it, but the uncle puts the glass down in case he changes his mind. And this drink has the dose of the drugs that he's trying to give to Ben. And he's lucky, one, that someone else didn't pick up this drink, someone who wasn't involved in the plot and didn't know what was going on, and that Ben ever took that drink at all.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting, only after the fact. He ends up joining Lola at the piano, who thinks that the demon is there because she is young. She was young and unmarried when she got pregnant. She thinks it's a punishment.
Yeah, she's blaming it on herself, which, you know, when we get to what's really going on, why would she reveal that? Like, why is she, like, I don't know, to say that I was pregnant out of wedlock seems like a shameful thing to admit in 1934.
I'm sure the attitudes back then were very different.
Yeah, and so I could see if she wasn't in on this, her actually believing that, like, oh my gosh, this is my fault.
Right, but the fact of the matter is she is in on it, so she knows what's going on.
So it seems weird for her to say that.
I thought it might be a ploy for sympathy.
Maybe.
But at the same time, she's trying that ploy with a priest who has a very different view of morality than the general populace.
Right.
So it is a pretty odd moment, for sure. So Ben thinks that 18 years is a long time to wait for God to dole out punishment, which is interesting for Ben to say, given the fact that he's not actually a priest, and he doesn't actually... I think we get the idea that he doesn't actually believe in God.
Yeah, he said he's not a man of faith.
Right. They end up hearing a scream. Everyone runs up to Daisy's room. Lola asks who untied the restraints, and Ben and the doctor give each other looks like, we're the blame for this. And everybody comes into the room. Everybody that's important comes into the room. Percy asks, where's Contessa? And it's funny that he asks that question because he knows full well where she is.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, she is very dead.
Yeah.
She's laying currently on a shelf on somebody's dresser, on her dresser, not looking very comfortable.
Dead, laying on top of the armoire. And they instantly jump to the conclusion that the demon inside Daisy is the one who killed her and put her there.
Yes, everybody in the room, except for the one who's actually responsible for doing the killing, believes this. And, okay, so... we cut to the next scene. They're having the body removed, but where are the police? They don't show up in the scene at all to question anybody. There's a murder that took place, and they're not questioning anybody about, what happened here.
Yeah.
I mean, are they just like, oh, well, it must be the demon?
Yeah.
Are they? Do they believe that?
They do, I think. Yeah, because that was the whole thing, right? Is we literally have a priest here to do an exorcism, and it was, I think. This is back in a time when exorcisms were happening. Like, we're getting to the end of that period. But this was, I think, a fairly common conception, is that there is deep evil here. And they do bring police in later in the episode.
They do.
Yeah. So, and also we do learn sometime in this episode the phone lines are out.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they wouldn't have had a way to call the police anyways.
But the coroners were there to remove the body. And the press was there to take pictures of what was going on. But we don't see any police.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a minor problem, but... So Ben is continuing to look for a rational explanation, while the doctor is completely given up on the rational. She's like, oh, there's no way that she could have done this. It must be demons. And it's just funny how quickly the doctor is just ready to throw away all logic and rationality, as opposed to Ben. And it's funny that the doctor sees Ben, who he sees as a priest, is still trying to find a rational explanation.
Yes.
So that's all kind of funny. And actually the fact that he says, I was taught to explore every possibility. And the doctor's like, wait, the Vatican taught you to do that?
And it's funny because I did see some... Now, I don't know a lot about exorcisms. And I don't know a lot about...
You don't say.
I don't really know a lot about any of this. But I did see someone in a forum talking about, that is what would have been normal. Before sanctioning an exorcism, they would go out of their way to try and rule out other possibilities.
Really?
The church doesn't just dole out exorcisms on a whim. They want to make sure that they truly believe. Now, they believe in the demons, of course.
Right.
But they want to make sure that that really is what's happening. And something I do know a little bit more about, which, is modern day paranormal investigations. Mm. That's what they do. They don't say, oh, look, it's a ghost that I just recorded. They are going to go out of their way to try and disprove it. Because the only way to kind of have proof of something paranormal is to disprove anything else.
Right. To make sure it stands up to scrutiny.
Yeah. So that is kind of a normal practice, right? A normal part of human way of logic is you're going to want to eliminate other possibilities to get to what the thing that you think it is. Even if you really believe this is the case, you're going to want to prove that it's not something else.
Makes sense. The picture that the press takes, by the way, is a picture that Ian ends up seeing on his computer back at the project.
Yeah, so at the project, right, they don't have, everything's down.
Right, they have no contact with Ben
the
whatsoever.
Imaging chamber's down, which we know now later is because of Janice's intervention here. But Ziggy's down, everything's down, the power's down, they're down to, generator lights. And I don't know if I missed something. Did they specifically say, is everything down? Or did they just devote all resources to trying to get the imaging chamber back up?
See, I was under the impression that the only thing that was down was the imaging chamber.
But they were sitting in the dark.
Were they? I thought the lights were on.
No, there was this red light. That was the only
so
light
it was
that was
emergency
on.
lighting?
Yeah, and they had no access to Ziggy at all, which is why Ian was like, let's look on Reddit to look up this case history.
Right.
Because
they just use the internet because they couldn't have
because
access to
Ziggy wasn't helping. They couldn't access Ziggy. So I think I missed a step if it was because they diverted all of their power to trying to fix the imaging chamber, or if there was a global outage. And if that's the case, did Janice cause it?
Right. If Janice has to shut the entire project down for the rest of the series to contact Ben, that seems like it would be a lot of trouble.
Yeah. But yeah, so in this scene, Ian is looking up this case on Reddit because in the history of this show, this is a real exorcism that took place. And of course, that's the kind of thing that is out there to learn about, right? Just the way I'm looking on Google about the original case that inspired The Exorcist. Well, in this world, this is an original case. This would have been something talked about in forums, and that's what they're looking at. And that's when they learned that Tessa died, and the way it was reported was that Daisy killed her.
Ben ends up sneaking around the house downstairs, ends up taking the drink left on the table, which is when he doses himself. Again, he's lucky, the perpetrator is lucky that Ben ever did this at all, and not someone else. The uncle enters the scene, and Ben ends up asking him what happened 3 weeks ago. And what from Percy's perspective, which turns out to be a lie. I mean, it's sort of true, but it's not really. He says that they were having an argument with Aunt Contessa, and Aunt Contessa was basically going to cut Charles out of the will.
Mm-hmm.
And he became very wrathful after this. So he's kind of blaming his brother for the demon possession.
Yeah, he's saying that Charles has a temper, and he's really trying to put the blame somewhere else.
Right. Charles ends up overhearing this, and this is where we learn that Percy lost their money on a bad investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we learned a little bit earlier. They mentioned that Charles had lost his job, and they lost their house, and that's why Charles and Lola and Daisy moved in with Aunt Contessa. And Percy's living there too. So she has both of her nephews there, the one nephew's family. It's 1934. We are in the Great Depression.
Right.
Right. And so Charles had lost his job. And what's happened here now is we find out that Charles is blaming his brother Percy for him losing his life savings because of an investment that Percy talked him into. Of course, it's not Percy's fault. Like, the entire stock market crash. It's the Great Depression.
So pretty much all the stocks would have lost all their money.
Right. And Charles is, he's desperate to blame somebody. He's blaming his brother here. And he really blames his entire family's misfortunes on his brother, which
I think
it's a little harsh.
I think this argument is real, despite the fact that Percy is full of crap.
Yeah.
There's real anger here.
Yeah.
And he's really blaming him for the things that have taken place.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, not for the demon possession, obviously, because there is no demon, and Percy knows that.
Yeah.
Ben ends up breaking this fight up, and Magda enters the scene to say that Daisy is unwell again. And I was like, when did she stop being unwell? Like, what do you mean she's unwell again? She's been unwell this entire time, but whatever. She says that she doesn't want the doctor, but she wants Ben. Specifically the priest, who Ben has leaped into. Upstairs, Daisy is babbling, and Ben is seeing things because he's now been dosed, and it's kicking in. He sees a demon and walls moving around, and
which is something specifically Daisy mentioned. She
Yes.
said the first symptom she had is she saw the wallpaper moving.
So I had a question about this. And this is where we see all the exorcism stuff with her floating off the bed, so on and so forth. And it's very lucky that he ends up hallucinating exactly what he needs to hallucinate.
Right.
But what you just brought up is that Daisy mentioned all this
She mentioned
stuff.
this.
So she put the thoughts in his head.
It's the power of suggestion, right? So now that his state of awareness has been altered, his brain, who just has all these ideas fresh in his head, that this is what he should be seeing. If something is happening, it's what he starts seeing.
Everything stops. Ben ends up asking if Daisy is okay and realizes the question is silly. Of course she's not. He ends up stepping on a paper, which nobody noticed this. Nobody who wasn't involved noticed this paper and accidentally stepped on it and was curious about it.
Well, even the people who were involved don't know about this part.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because, it ends up being a dead fish, which is the reason for the bad smell.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor comes into the scene, and Ben ends up saying that he found the source of the demon smell, and they must find who's responsible. And it looks like this is going to be like a big mystery, and Magda comes in and immediately confesses. Yeah. Well, that was suspenseful for about 2 seconds.
Right. So she says that the demon is...
Dybbuk or something like that?
Dybbuk, which is a demon that, and by putting the fish under the bed, it's to help swear off the Dybbuk.
It's apparently a Jewish tradition.
Yes. Have you heard of this?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm really Jewish in name only. You might notice that Corman is a very Jewish name.
Yeah, you're Jewish by heritage, but not by religion.
But I know nothing about the Jewish faith. But still, I found that little tidbit to be interesting.
Yeah. And that was pretty gross. Like this image of this rotten fish covered in maggots. So has it been there the entire 3 weeks?
I mean, probably.
That's pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
And so here now, Magda unwillingly has helped contribute to this whole farce, right?
Yeah, I mean, she pretty much unknowingly helps the conspirators here.
And yeah, we don't know. Do they know this fish is there? Do they know she's done this? I don't think they do.
But it's interesting that they're like, oh, well, now it smells. Well, that helps us.
Right.
But they aren't curious themselves as to
right?
why. So they learned that after her 18th birthday, she would inherit her grandmother's wealth after she died. Magda doesn't think that Daisy would ever hurt her grandmother, so she doesn't think that she's responsible for his grandmother's death, at least not willingly. She still thinks it's the demon.
Right.
She doesn't realize that there's something else going on here. Back at the project, Addison reveals to Jen that she never wanted to get married. And this actually ties into the conversations that we had last week about Addison's parents. We get a little bit more background.
Yeah, we're getting these sprinkles about her, as well as other characters. She says that her parents are divorced. After that, they couldn't even be in the same room together. This is why she never really believed in marriage, because she came from this broken home. And I still wonder, is the story of who her parents are and her background going to come into play? Is it going to be that her story has something to do with something we know from the original series?
I mean, this is the second episode in a row that we're bringing it up.
They're bringing it up, right? And they're sprinkling it so slowly. So I still feel like there's something to this story that we need to be paying attention to.
And I actually like the scene between the two of them. I thought it was very, very done. It's a character-based scene as opposed to just oh my god, what's going on? Like that we usually get at the project. In the past, Ben needs someone to talk to, so he seeks out a priest, specifically his mirror image.
Yes.
He starts to speak to basically himself, looking at the mirror, trying to get some answers, because he doesn't have Addison. He doesn't really have anybody that he can really talk to at this point. He ends up, in the end, deciding that he needs to have an open mind. I think you mentioned that already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is that moment, and he decides that he's going to do something that's a little bit out of his comfort zone, and he's going to try to perform this exorcism.
Yeah. And I thought that was a really beautiful scene. I enjoyed it. Really getting to see the actor playing the mirror image. That actor got to do something, right? They really kind of performed in this scene.
Yes, it was very effective.
I mean, that's just Ben doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it really felt like there was a conversation happening. And I don't think they were trying to say, I saw some people talking about this, and they were like, oh, was the priest actually communicating with him?
No, I don't think that's
the case. It was literally just Ben talking to himself. And we were seeing him, from both perspectives, from himself and from the mirror. But I love that they were able to bring in that other actor to do that. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a really nice moment. And I think it was building upon Ben's character. And I think he is learning to look a little broader. Leaping has to broaden your horizons and broaden your viewpoint, right? If you're
Absolutely. You're going to inhabit different people's
you're seeing history. You're getting to see other people, walk in other people's shoes, and if you're not growing from this, then you're not doing it right, I don't think.
I think it's impossible not to grow in that situation. Okay, so he ends up trying to go to perform the exorcism. He starts step 1, getting the demon to reveal itself. And we have Daisy's eyes glow red. Okay, so I actually was wrong. This is actually the scene where we see the most exorcism activity.
Yeah.
With her rising from the bed.
And something, though, we did see in the last scene, I think, because I wrote that before in my notes. Something that we can conclude at the end that was part of his hallucination was the line that Daisy gave, which she says, "The end is nigh for you, traveler." And it was like, oh, Daisy, or whoever this is, knows that Ben is a traveler. Mm-hmm. And I think he saw that as someone talking to him directly, not talking to the father. But I think we can conclude that was hallucination.
Yes.
That Daisy didn't really say that to him. He heard that.
It was basically
during
in his mind.
Yeah. But in that moment, it made me think wow, is Daisy possessed by a leaper? That was my question. I was like, is Martinez here? Is a different leaper here?
Speaking of Martinez, and this is just a random time to bring this up, the actor who plays that leaper does not appear in this episode at all, but he is credited as having appeared. Now, that's the kind of thing that you usually do when you're going to become a regular in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a guest star and you don't appear in the episode, you're not credited. But here he is definitely credited as appearing.
Right. We were talking about that. Was it some kind of error that he was included? Does he have cast status right now? I haven't seen anything about that. So that's interesting that he would have been credited in this episode.
So as Ben is hallucinating this series of events, he sees an evil spirit. I don't think this is an attempt to contact Ben at this point. I think this is just pure hallucination. The spirit seems to enter into Ben, and then Ben is knocked unconscious. He wakes up in a bed that sort of looks like a mixture of his own bedroom and the bedroom of Daisy, basically.
Right. There, some of Daisy's furniture was there. And I have to note, I talked at the beginning of the episode how this whole episode was very dark. I don't mean the content, I mean the lighting. Right. This whole episode, the house is very dark, and it's the 30s. I think they're using candlelight and like oil lanterns, right?
Yep.
In the house. And at the project, it's very dark. They have this emergency lighting on. But this scene was very bright.
Yeah, it was it was overexposed.
This scene was a room of white light. That's where he was. He was in a brightly lit white room with like Daisy's furniture. And yeah, it kind of resembled those not hallucinations, but memories he's been having of him and Addison. And at the same time, it's the setting of Daisy's room. And I liked it. I thought it was really well done the way they did this set.
Ben ends up questioning how Addison is there and eventually realizes that it's a hallucination.
Yeah, he was smart enough to know he's dreaming.
Which, how many people can possibly do that?
Remember,
like, generally speaking,
he's really smart, remember?
Generally speaking, though, when you're having a dream or hallucination, you don't know you're having a dream or hallucination.
Right.
So that's like...
Ben retained enough consciousness in this to know that this room isn't right. This isn't where he's supposed to be. He has enough consciousness to know Addison's here with me. He specifically says, I know I didn't leap home.
Right.
So he's able to come to that conclusion that this isn't real. And I think it does play on how intelligent Ben is. And he has this like really high level of upper thinking that most of us don't process things the same way he does.
Right. And then they end up going through a list of suspects. First, she suggests the maid, and they quickly rule her out because she was using the fish to help.
And this is where the episode turns into
Clue. It goes from a horror movie to more like a murder mystery.
It's a murder mystery. It's literally a game of Clue. You know, you're playing who did it in what room with what weapon.
Yes, it was not the maid in the conservatory with the candlestick, unfortunately. Well, no, fortunately, because I kind of like the maid.
Yeah.
They also rule out the mother.
You mean the aunt?
Actually, the mother.
Oh, you mean
Lola.
Lola. Okay.
Yeah, they rule out Lola having killed Contessa because she was downstairs at the piano playing with Ben when that happened.
Yeah, gotcha.
The doctor, they rule out because he has no motive whatsoever, but that's a giant assumption, as you brought up.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that he could have been in cahoots with somebody.
Yeah, Ben doesn't really know these people, right? So his versions of what he knows isn't necessarily the full picture. But yeah, he doesn't believe. And again, this is all Ben. This is all in his head. Addison is also Ben in this scene, right? Addison's not really there.
He's basically essentially talking to himself.
Yeah.
And then, so that leaves the angry father, Charles, and Percy. And one of them would gain money if Contessa and Daisy were both out of the picture, because he would be third in line to get all that money, because Charles was cut out of the will. So, that is the suspect that Ben is going with. He now believes that Percy is responsible, but he's wondering, how could he have gotten into the room to kill the aunt? And he speculates that there must have been a secret passageway between Percy's room and Daisy's room. And when the hallucination ends, he goes and looks for that. And sure enough, there is that room.
So it's inside of the armoire, right? He moves the clothes. He finds the secret passageway. And I wrote down, here's the passageway to Narnia.
Right.
I feel like we're bringing in another like reference here. We're going to the back of the wardrobe here. And I wrote, is this where the goat is? Is the goat in there?
Right. You really wanted to see this goat.
I was waiting for it. But, real quick on that scene with Addison, I thought it was really beautiful. Addison he knew right away, right? So there's no illusion here that Ben thinks this is real. He knows it's in his head. And it was just this really tender moment that Ben fantasized between him and Addison. And I thought it was great that they filmed this scene where these two actors were able to touch each other and interact and embrace. And I feel like it helped with their chemistry of these actors a little bit. One criticism I've seen is people saying they don't feel chemistry between Ben and Addison, right? They wish that the fact that they were in a relationship wasn't even a plot point because they just don't feel it.
Right.
And I think that a scene like this helped.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It helped show that bond between them, and it shows Ben's like remembering these things, and he is having these feelings for her, and he's dreaming about touching her and holding her and kissing her. And even though he knows it's not real, he's just really enjoying this moment of presence with her. And I thought, all in all, it was a really beautiful scene. Yeah,
it was really nicely done. And that goes back to the director of the episode. Chris Grismer really did a pretty fantastic job with this episode. It's the second episode in a row that he was responsible for, at least in part. So I think he's going to get more work in the series, and I think he should.
Yeah. So yeah, he wakes up and he goes and he finds the passageway at the back of the Narnia closet. And where does it lead to? Percy's room.
So at this point, he knows for sure that Percy is responsible for this, whatever is going on here. And he knows that he's been dosed, and that's why he was seeing the things that he was seeing before. But also, I think he realizes at this point that Daisy has also been dosed. But no, that hasn't happened yet. Never mind. That's coming up. Okay, so Ben is actually sitting at her bedside when the list of suspects joins, and they end up telling Ben, well, they end up asking about Ben's progress, and Ben claims to be making progress, which he is, just not in the way that they think that he's making.
Right.
They end up mentioning that Magna is downstairs preparing soup, and I was wondering if this was the way that they were going to end up dosing Daisy for the last time, without Magna knowing. Ben quickly leaves the room to make a phone call. He tries to call 911, but the phones are down, according to Magna, who believes...
Well, before the phones are down, he realized 911 hasn't been invented yet.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
And then Magna's like, the phones are down.
So, do you have any information about what they did to call the police back in the 1930s?
I mean, I imagine you would be connected to the operator and ask for the police, right?
Okay, so it's just that there's no quick way to do it, but you still just go to the operator.
You had to go to an operator to make any call at this point.
Right.
Right? The operator, you'd tell the operator who to connect you to.
Okay. Yeah, so Magna thinks it's the demon, but Ben pretty much says that no, it's not the demon. Forget the demon. And he asks once again what happened on Daisy's 18th birthday.
On her birthday, yeah.
And we get basically a different idea, a different picture of what happened. Charles ended up refusing the money from his aunt, and that's why he ended up getting cut out.
Right. Tessa basically accused him of taking advantage of her, right? You moved in with me and I'm supporting you. Why are you not finding a new job? She says, why can't you be a salesman like your brother? We had learned Percy is an encyclopedia salesman. He's a door-to-door salesman. And she says, why can't you be a salesman like your brother? Why, are you... Basically, we get the idea that he's depressed from losing his job. He's depressed from losing his house and his money.
Which is normal.
And he hasn't taken another job, I think, because he's holding out for something, a higher position, And
those positions at this point don't exist.
Right.
Because it's the Depression era.
Right. So he has pride, and he had a good job before, and he doesn't want to stoop to his brother's level. I don't think he has any respect for his brother. And the insinuation that his aunt makes that, he's trying to take advantage of her, he says, I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you, because he says, I'm proud. I can support my family. So this is why he decides he doesn't want to be in the will.
And Ben ends up basically telling Magda that the killer, or the would-be killer, and the one who's responsible for everything, is the one who stands to get the money out of this situation, which in this case is Percy. And
right, because Tessa left everything to Daisy, which I think is strange.
Yeah.
Why would she have left it all to the youngest person in the first place?
Yeah, I don't see that she had a problem with Percy, so why wasn't Percy involved in that?
Why wasn't Percy before Daisy. But yeah, she left all the money to Daisy. So if they kill Daisy, which is what originally happens, Percy would be the next in line, and he's set to inherit the money.
Ben ends up wanting to know what he was dosed with and what Daisy is being dosed with. But he's having trouble with this because, one, he doesn't have Addison there to look information up.
Yep.
And also, there's no internet.
Yeah, and he specifically said something like, oh, I really wish the internet. And Magna's like, what? What's the internet?
And then he realizes there's a bunch of encyclopedias.
Yes.
So the fact that Percy is an encyclopedia salesman ends up biting him in the butt.
Yeah, and so it was funny. He was like, encyclopedias, the original internet. And I love that line. There's a lot of like great one-liners in this episode. And, you know, it was a really good thing, though. Magda, she says, yeah, I remember he was talking about something. It started with a J.
Did she say J?
Yeah.
I thought she said Jim or something like that.
She said it started with a J, and then she kind of, you know, went from there, and she was like, Jim. But I wrote down, it was really convenient that she remembered this conversation started with a J, because encyclopedias are not going to be helpful to you if you don't have a starting spot, right?
Well, you can just look at everything, but that'll take a while. Yeah, so it ends up turning out that Magna got him Jimson weed, and that's what Ben was dosed with, and that is what Daisy is dosed with, and the final dose is going to be delivered at 12:06, 6 minutes after midnight, to finally kill her.
Yeah. And basically, Jimson weed she's been taking it for 3 weeks. This is what's caused all of her symptoms that appeared as her affliction, that made it look like she was possessed.
He asked Magna for help in exposing him, and he wants the doctor's help as well, because he doesn't think he's involved in any kind of way. Ben sets up a charade where everyone believes Daisy is dead.
Yeah, this was a very, like, it reminded me of, like, Romeo and Juliet, you know, where the doctor's in on faking the death.
And so, yeah, Ben sets things up that to make it appear like she's dead, starts reading last rites or whatever he's doing there. Ben says that, the demon is still here. And he starts with step 1, getting the demon to reveal itself. And it's funny that he ends up using the 3 steps of exorcism to help him out of the situation, but not using it as an exorcism at all.
Right. So I guess you can say Ziggy was right. He had to perform an exorcism.
Yeah,
Except he wasn't exorcising a demon. He was exorcising the truth by exorcising this murderer by pulling out the truth.
That's some metaphorical work by Ziggy there. Okay, so reveal the demon. Daisy sits up in a sheet. Step 2, fight for the demon's soul. He asks Daisy, what do you want? And Daisy ends up saying, oh, somebody killed Daisy. And Ben asks, who? And Daisy points to Percy. And Percy at this point completely starts freaking out.
Yeah.
Ben can't confess everything. And he does so.
He confesses, yes, I killed my aunt. Yes, I poisoned Daisy. Yes, I wanted to kill her. Or I did kill her, right? Because they think she's dead at this point.
But it wasn't for the inheritance money. It was for Lola. It was for love, because they were going to run away together. Yeah,
which Ben had not figured this part out, right? He thought Percy did this alone. It was all Percy because he wants the money. And Lola's like, damn it, Percy.
I mean, technically it's true. He still did it for the inheritance money, though.
Yeah, but he did it because he's in love with his sister-in-law, and they wanted to run away together to Hollywood. She did tell us in that scene earlier when she was playing the piano, and she was talking about how she got pregnant with Daisy before they were married.
Which is pretty much her motivation for why she does all this.
She had this dream of going to Hollywood and being an actress. She already mentioned that before, that she wanted to be an actress. And so now we find out that was her motive here. She's trying to kill her daughter so that she can leave her husband with her brother-in-law, which I'm guessing she's just using him too. I doubt she really is interested in the brother-in-law, but she knows he's the one who's going to get the money.
Right.
So she's trying to use him to get this money to abandon her family and go to Hollywood.
Yeah, Lola turns out to not be a very good person.
No, she's a terrible person. She's a terrible mother. Oh my God, she murdered her daughter. If you want to leave your family, leave your family. Go to Hollywood.
Kill your daughter to get some money. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Like, why didn't you just steal the silver and go?
Percy ends up begging for forgiveness, but Ben says that he does not have the authority to grant that. And Daisy ends up taking off the sheet. What do you know? She's not actually dead. And despite everything, and I can't believe this, but she says, I forgive you. And this is because of her faith and what she believes in. But man, that's some pretty powerful forgiving powers, because your mother was trying to kill you. So that's...
And did kill... I mean, they killed the aunt.
Right.
Like, murder happened.
Right.
Which, I think that's why they had to do this, because if Ben prevented everything bad from happening, they wouldn't have actually committed a crime, right?
Right. The constable was in the scene. I haven't mentioned that, but he says, well, it's nice that your daughter forgives you, but you're still going to jail.
Yeah, and proceeds to arrest both Percy and Lola.
And step 3, the demon leaves. The exorcist wins. And like I said, I love how they did that with the 3 steps to exorcism.
Yeah.
I just, that was a great scene.
It came all full circle, and he's like, yeah, I opened my mind to exorcism, and now I was able to use this new skill that I learned to, like, make this really, like, powerful point.
Yeah, it was pretty well done. Back at the project, the past picture disappears. They no longer see the dead aunt anymore. Wait, why not?
Okay, so this was the Reddit post he had up.
Right.
And so the screen changed to error 404.
Right.
So the Reddit post, which would have been like, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, it would have been something completely different.
It would have had, like, this story in the keyword, in the address.
Right.
And now all of a sudden that address that they had open doesn't exist anymore, because they're no longer talking about this exorcism and how this girl died during the exorcism.
No, it's just straight up murder.
It's just a murder case, right? Which means less people are talking about it. It's not, and especially the same people, like that whole paranormal community or whatever that's talking about the exorcism isn't talking about this murder case.
Now they're talking about something completely different, which would occur on a different address. Back in the past, Daisy has decided to basically give all of her inheritance to charity, and specifically starting up a Goodwill.
Yes.
Which Ben laughs at, thinking, oh, well, I know that's going to be successful.
Yeah, so I found this funny because, okay, I'm a reseller. That's what I do for a living. I buy things, I resell them. And so I have this love-hate relationship with Goodwill, as all resellers do. And I just found it funny that they mentioned this. So I did look it up. Goodwill started in 1902 in Boston.
Okay, so this is completely
inaccurate. So this is 32 years later, Goodwill's been around. And she said, yeah, it's this, like, startup down the street that I've heard of. So that is wrong. But Goodwill had come to Baltimore in 1919. So we're still, 15 years after that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt a little off that she's, like, saying this brand new company, or this brand new charity, Goodwill. So I feel like it wasn't totally historically accurate that they would mention it in that way, but I still thought it was a funny mention. And it also reminded me of, in the original series, when we didn't mention Goodwill in the original series, we mentioned Salvation Army.
Ah, yes.
In the Christmas, I forget the name of that episode. It's the one where basically
Al plays Scrooge.
Yeah, it was the Scrooge episode.
I'm blanking on the episode's name at this time. Okay, yeah, so that's interesting. She ends up revealing that she saw Ben at the beginning of the episode as Ben.
And she describes him, so we know it's true. So when she said, you're an angel, came to help me, she literally saw Ben. And I was questioning also, I think that she saw
Janice's
maybe
attempt.
She saw Janice also, because it seemed like she was responding to that, and she thought it was the demon. But I feel like she saw things, and that brought into question. I was like, why is she seeing things? Like, that's like, you talked about the original series, how all of the episodes kind of left us with a paranormal twist, even after most things are explained. And I feel like, even though this isn't really a paranormal twist, I feel like that's the twist here, is Daisy did see the truth. She saw things, and I guess it brings up the question of why is she able to?
I mean, maybe for the same reason that Ben's consciousness was altered because of the Jimson weed. Maybe it was the drugs that did it, but that's the only explanation.
In addition to children and animals and those with diminished mental capacity. We can add people who are on drugs.
Possibly.
As people who can see leapers.
Possibly. I mean, we haven't really...
Specifically psychedelic drugs.
Yeah, we haven't really confirmed that any of that is true in the new series.
We haven't had those moments. And I wish we would, because if they just kind of ignore that, I feel like they're ignoring a huge part of the story, right?
Right. I mean, eventually I'm sure they'll bring it in.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they'll do that. So she makes the comment that Ben is leaving now, and she thinks that means that she knows that Ben is going to weep.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, she means the priest is going to go back to Baltimore.
Back to Baltimore, right.
Ben ends up picking up a book. When he turns to see Janice, this is after she has left the scene, he ends up turning to see Janice, who's been trying to reach him all day. She starts talking, and then Ben weeps.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, we know that, I mean, it's never really said specifically, but that those pre-ghost images that Ben saw was Janice.
Right. Because when we see Janice this time, at first, she looks like that. She has that kind of same, like, black smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, which I hadn't thought of this. I can add that to my list of Easter eggs. This was very much a black smoke monster we saw.
Oh, yes.
So there's a lost reference for you. She had that same kind of appearance, real briefly this time.
Yeah.
And then she came into focus, and oh, look, it's Janice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you're led to kind of make the assumption that all of these figures we saw throughout the episode was Janice trying to make herself visible to Ben.
So that officially confirms one of your theories that Janice was trying to get in touch with Ben.
Yeah, so that
chamber.
Dome that she built was an imaging chamber. And this also kind of tells us that, at least for right now, with where the technology stands, Addison and Janice can't be there at the same time. Because as soon as Janice tried coming in, it kicked Addison out, right? That's when Addison lost contact.
I'm kind of hoping if they continue this plot that they sort of ditch that, like they find a way around it.
Janice fixes it.
Yeah, so that she can. Because I don't know, that just seems like... I mean, she'll definitely get better at doing it, I guess.
Yeah.
But...
So, I mean, I said before, we're talking about the technology's 30 years old, so it makes sense that she's got some tweaking to do. So maybe she continues to tweak it, and both girls are able to talk to Ben. But she seemed like she had a really fleeting message for Ben. She was trying to warn him about something.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, she didn't get to finish the message because he left. And she was like, no, wait, I have to tell you something.
Yes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the episode, which that leads into next week's episode.
Yeah, it led to the leap out.
Which is Ben leaping into a 16-year-old named Ben, apparently.
Yeah, so we got that, and the person said, hey, Ben, and he was like, hey, do you know me? So this is the first time Ben is going to get to use his own name. I think the first time Sam got to use his own name was Samantha Stormer.
Yes.
So he's going to get to use his own name. And the episode is called Stand By Ben.
Which is a play on Stand By
Me.
Which is a movie based on a Stephen King story.
It's based on the Stephen King short story, The Body. So this is kind of a King reference, I'm going to say, which plays nicely since this is the tale of the Halloween episode. And at the end of Boogeyman, we learned that one of the characters was Stephen King. So I feel like that was a great place to put this reference.
Even if it was totally accidental.
Yeah.
We do see that Addison is in the promo for next week's episode.
Yep.
So the project is fixed at that point. It kind of leads to the question, is Janice going to contact Ben again in this episode?
Right. So yeah, between the leap out and the trailer, which I kind of forget what was which, but we see Ben. He's a teenager. He's with some other teenagers. We got the names Leah and Stacie, and there was another male there as well. And they ran away from whatever this place is. It looked kind of like a summer camp to me, but then Ben called it a school. He said, "So we're escaping school."
I mean, that was just Ben talking. Maybe he doesn't fully know.
And the name of the place was on the screen, and I meant to grab that, and I didn't write that down. But then it starts playing the Song 2 by Blur, which came out in 1997. I looked that up. And so instantly they're setting the tone with music, which is something were missing, right? That happened a lot in the original series. They're setting the tone here with music. Instantly, we know when we're in the 90s.
Assuming that they actually stick to that, but yes.
Yeah, so that Song 2 came out in 97. Then in the trailer, a minute later, Addison tells us it's the year 1996.
Oh, okay.
So
I missed that reference.
there's already a continuity error here. They're playing a song that came out in 97 and it's 96. And I don't feel like that's a big deal, but it reminds me in the forums or I think it was on Facebook, somebody had a problem in, which episode was it? I think it was last week. What a disaster. Now, I didn't confirm this. I don't recall this song, but someone said a song played in the episode, like within the episode that hadn't come out yet. That had come out like a year or two after that was taking place. So I feel like that's a theme that they're doing. They're playing songs a year or two earlier than they're supposed to.
See, that's the kind of thing that I wouldn't notice necessarily.
Yeah. And I looked the song up just to get a setting, to confirm what year are we looking at. We're looking at this year or later, right? If the song's playing. But then in the trailer, which came on immediately after I looked that up, it said 96. And I was like, oh, wait, I just wrote down this song came out in 97. So I don't know. Are these continuity errors? Or, I don't know. Are they taking a play on time travel by giving us music outside of its time?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're setting the decade of the 90s without necessarily, unless we hear the song in the episode itself and not part of the soundtrack, then... Which
I'm not sure if it was meant to be or not.
Like,
if it was meant that they're actually playing it in the Jeep that they're riding in. I don't know. But yeah, so we saw in the trailer, it looks like this is going to be kind of a survival situation. They're out in the wilderness. We see Ben say, we have no food and no water. We're going to die.
Yeah, well, glad you're not going to panic in this situation.
So they took the name from Stand By Me. I don't know how much of the story is actually going to follow that story. I mean, Quantum Leap, both the original and in some of these episodes now are starting to follow that pattern where they're named after other media, but they don't necessarily have anything to do with that media. Right. So I don't necessarily think they're looking for a body.
Well, the character's name is Ben, so it could be involved in that.
I mean, in Stand By Me, the body story, they're on an adventure looking for a dead body, right? So I don't think that's literally what's going to happen here. We'll find out exactly what the motive is of this group of teenagers, but this is the youngest we've seen Ben so far, right? Yep. He's playing a 16-year-old, and this is the first time he's using his own name, so it should be fun to explore that.
Should be a good episode. And as it turns out, this is actually the fall finale.
The fall finale, they told us in the trailer, which is a little sad. It means the show's taking a hiatus, and we have to be concerned for ratings.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? It could definitely affect the ratings and viewership, which is, a problem when we're trying to get a second season.
Yes.
But it's not like, they were never going to take a break.
No, but they're taking a break already.
Right.
So, Fate's Wide Wheel, which is, of course, like the real Quantum Leap podcast. If you're listening to us, I'm sure you know who they are. I don't usually listen to their shows prior to us recording because I don't want to be...
You want to form your own opinions.
I don't want to be influenced by what they say, right? I don't want us to just copy like their thoughts.
Yep.
But in this case, they did give a timestamp of when in their episode they talked about this. So I went and listened to that little clip because they had some inside information about the break.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I did go and listen. So this is coming from Fate's Wide Wheel. They said this is exclusive information they got, and I believe them because, they get, pre-screeners of the episodes. They have an in. And they said that there's not going to be any new episodes until January.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me too much.
Yeah, so they're saying this is officially the full winter break. They're not coming back in December at all. They're taking, that full 8-10 weeks off, which is a little scary for the ratings.
Yeah. It's definitely something to be concerned with, especially since they're, gaining new members, they can start losing interest.
Now, another thing that they mention is that NBC is going to be playing repeats of all 8 episodes during that break.
Oh, okay. So it gives people a chance to catch up.
The show is going to continue to air Mondays at 10, starting, I'm assuming, with the pilot and running forward. So yeah, it's going to give another chance for the show to run for people who maybe are channel surfing and catch it.
So that could be good.
It could be good. But I think it's important that everybody who's listening, you're fans of this show, keep talking about the show, keep spreading the word. We need to keep it alive so that everybody comes back in January to watch episode 9.
All right. Any additional thoughts on this week's episode?
I think we covered all of my points. I'll just say again, I really love the episode. I definitely plan on watching it again now that I don't have to think about the details anymore and just really submersing myself in the environment, because the sets are really beautiful. It was really gorgeously done, and I do suggest everybody go back and watch it. Go back and watch all the episodes again, because apparently we're going to have time to do that.
Yes.
So we'll be back.
Taking a bit of a break.
We'll be back next week to talk about Stand By Ben, and then the show's going on hiatus. That's going to give you, I'm assuming, a chance to go back and do some more original series rewatch episodes. Yes,
I will. The show might be taking a break, but I personally won't be.
Yeah, so Corin Productions covered everything through Boogeyman so
And
far.
the next episode that I'd be covering would be Miss Deep South.
Which I did just watch that one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I told you we watched Boogeyman. We watched Miss Deep South was the last one we watched. Which I think it's kind of a fun episode.
Yeah.
It's, getting to see Ben. It's
Sam?
humorous.
Sam?
Woo, I did it backwards.
Yeah.
Whoa.
This is the time that I'm catching you doing that.
And you're probably going to do that when you start talking about the original series again.
Probably.
But yeah, getting to see Sam, play a beauty pageant. It's humorous. I like it. It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, originally I didn't like it back in the day, and it definitely, when I watch it again, definitely does improve upon rewatch. It's not like a great episode, but it's definitely an okay, fun episode.
Yeah.
I do have some issues with it, which I'll cover when I actually talk about that episode.
Yeah,
but
everybody make sure you stay tuned to Corin Productions, because you'll be talking about that and some other season 3 episodes over the next couple months while Quantum Leap's on hiatus.
If we would like to hear from you. What would you think about this week's episode? What do you think of our podcast? Stacie can be reached at...
I can be reached on Twitter at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and want to support the channel, you can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And you can subscribe to this podcast on the podcast platforms, as well as liking, sharing, and commenting on my YouTube channel and subscribing to my channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Corbin Productions, signing off.